When you stop chasing, something shifts. The silence you create speaks louder than every message you've ever sent. It's in that silence that a man is forced to face himself, to face what he lost, what he took for granted, and what he thought he could always return to. You see, distance reveals truth. Because when you stop contacting a man, you stop feeding his ego and start feeding his reality. That's when you discover who he really is, and more importantly, who you've always been beneath the noise, calm, grounded, and powerful in your absence. When you stop contacting someone, something subtle yet powerful begins to happen, an energetic shift that cannot be measured by words or logic. You begin to take back the power that was once freely given away through attention, reaction, and emotional investment. For a long time, you may have been giving energy to a man without realizing how much it cost you. Every message, every call, every attempt to fix what he continued to break slowly chipped away at your inner peace. When you stop contacting him, you are not just refraining from communication. You are reclaiming yourself. You are pulling your energy back into your own soul, back into your center, where it belongs. And though silence feels uncomfortable at first, it is that very discomfort that begins to heal you. Because what you are really doing is breaking an invisible cord, an energetic connection that had bound you not through love, but through dependence, expectation, and attachment. When you stop feeding that connection, he begins to feel the emptiness. He may not understand it logically, but energetically he senses something is missing. The validation, the warmth, the reassurance that came from your messages, from your energy, from your concern, it suddenly disappears. For someone who was used to being fed by your attention, that silence becomes louder than any argument. He begins to notice the quiet where your voice used to be. It becomes like an echo, reminding him of how much space you once occupied in his world. At first, his mind might dismiss it. He might convince himself that your absence doesn't matter. He might say to himself that you're just playing games or being dramatic. But the truth is, the human mind is wired to crave what once brought comfort. And when that comfort disappears, curiosity follows. He starts wondering, why isn't she reaching out? What changed? Did she meet someone else? Did she finally give up? His ego begins to search for answers that his pride refuses to ask directly. That's when the silence begins to speak its own language. It's no longer about punishment or revenge. It's about redirection. The energy you once poured into trying to make him understand, you now flows back into your own growth. You begin to see things more clearly. The fog of attachment starts to lift, and you realize how much power you had given away in the form of waiting for replies, overthinking his moods, or trying to decode his silence. When you stop contacting him, you also stop betraying yourself for connection. You choose to face your own loneliness rather than beg for temporary attention. And in doing so, you begin to discover your true strength. There is something deeply spiritual about detachment. It doesn't mean you no longer care. It means you no longer depend. It means you have learned that peace does not require permission. Many women mistake love for endurance. They believe that holding on longer will make him understand. But what often makes a man realize your worth is not your persistence, but your absence. Because absence creates reflection, and reflection creates awareness. When your voice is no longer there to reassure him, he is forced to sit with his own thoughts. That silence becomes a mirror. It reflects his behavior back to him. He starts to feel the weight of every ignored message, every broken promise, every time he took your patience for granted. And though he may not say it out loud, something inside him begins to shift. Because for the first time, he feels what you once felt. The uncertainty, the wondering, the longing. He starts to understand the value of your consistency by facing the void it left behind. But here is where you must be careful. The power of silence only works when it comes from a place of inner peace, not manipulation. If your silence is filled with resentment or expectation, it still binds you to him energetically. True detachment comes when you stop waiting for a reaction, when your silence is no longer about making him miss you, but about giving yourself space to breathe again. It's a discipline of emotional self-control, the kind that transforms you from reactive to reflective. It's easy to think that silence is passive, but it's actually one of the strongest forms of communication. It shows that you no longer need to explain your worth. You no longer need to convince someone to see your value. Silence says, "I've said all that needs to be said," and it demands a kind of respect that words often fail to earn. When you stop contacting him, you're not abandoning love, you're abandoning chaos. You are saying no to confusion, no to emotional instability, and yes to your peace. A man who has been conditioned by your attention feels a sense of control when you chase him. It reassures his ego that he's desired, that he's wanted. But when you remove that energy, he loses his emotional anchor. He begins to wonder why his presence no longer moves you. That is when his sense of dominance begins to fade, and he starts to see you differently. The woman who was once predictable becomes mysterious, and mystery awakens pursuit. Because deep down, a man's nature is drawn to what he cannot easily possess. But this time, it's not about playing hard to get. It's about finally realizing that your energy is sacred. You start to understand that not everyone deserves your emotional investment. Silence teaches you that peace is not found in fixing others, but in fixing your own boundaries. You stop explaining why you needed more effort, more care, more honesty. Instead, you show it through your absence. You show it by not showing up where you're not appreciated. That is how silence becomes your most powerful form of self-respect. When you stop contacting him, you also begin to hear yourself again. The noise of overthinking, the constant checking of your phone, the anxiety of waiting, it all begins to fade. You start to fill your time with things that nurture you instead of drain you. The focus shifts inward, and in that shift, you grow. You begin to realize that you were never waiting for him to love you. You were waiting for yourself to remember who you are. That realization alone breaks every chain that once held you emotionally captive. He will begin to notice the change in your energy. Maybe not immediately, but he will feel it. People always feel it when your energy no longer chases them. He may reach out eventually, testing to see if you're still available emotionally, but the difference now is that you are no longer reacting from the same space. You are calm, detached, and grounded in your worth. You respond, if you choose to, not from need, but from clarity. And that difference changes everything. It's in your silence that he begins to see what your presence truly meant. Because the truth is, people often don't appreciate peace until chaos replaces it. He may begin to replay the conversations in his mind, trying to understand what caused your distance. He might scroll through old messages, looking for signs of the shift. That is what silence does. It turns your absence into a mirror he cannot escape. And whether he admits it or not, he feels it deeply. But more importantly, silence allows you to see the truth as well. It reveals whether he values you enough to reach back, or whether he was only comfortable receiving your energy without ever matching it. It brings clarity, sometimes painful, but always necessary, because clarity frees you from illusions. When you stop contacting him, you stop trying to force a connection that may no longer be meant for you. You surrender control and allow truth to reveal itself. And as that truth unfolds, you begin to see the beauty of your own transformation. You realize that your strength was never in how much you could give, but in how peaceful you could let go. You see, silence is not the end of communication. It is a higher form of it. It speaks without words. It teaches without confrontation. It heals without noise. It's the language of self-mastery. And those who have learned to use it never chase what they've outgrown. So when you stop contacting him, you are not losing anything. You are simply ending an energetic imbalance that has gone on for too long. You are closing a chapter that was written in confusion and opening one that begins with clarity. You are no longer waiting for someone else to value you. You are becoming the one who does. And as your energy withdraws from him, it begins to magnetize everything that aligns with your peace. New opportunities, deeper connections, and a renewed sense of self. The world responds differently to a woman who has mastered her silence. Her energy feels grounded, her presence feels calm, and her boundaries feel unshakable. That is the kind of energy that commands respect without demanding it. It is the energy of someone who has learned that love is not found in clinging, but in release. When you stop contacting him, you are not closing your heart, you are purifying it. You are learning to love without losing yourself in the process. And that, perhaps, is the greatest lesson of all. Silence is not the absence of communication. It is the presence of strength. It is the art of speaking without words, of teaching without explaining, of commanding respect without raising your voice. It is the sacred language of self-worth. When you master that language, you no longer chase what was never meant to stay. You simply let it go, knowing that what is truly yours will always find its way back. Not because you called it, but because your silence made space for it to return. When you stop giving your energy to someone who once felt entitled to it, confusion begins to settle in their mind. A man who was once accustomed to your messages, your attention, your warmth, suddenly feels the absence of what once made him feel powerful. He doesn't immediately understand it as loss. He feels it first as discomfort. Something feels off, something feels missing, but he can't name it. What he's feeling is the withdrawal of your emotional energy, the very energy that used to feed his sense of control. For so long, your consistency gave him a false sense of security. He thought no matter how he acted, you would always be there. Your kindness, your empathy, your forgiveness became his comfort zone. But when that disappears, when you no longer chase, no longer call, no longer try to fix things that he continuously breaks, it leaves him exposed to his own emptiness. He begins to question what happened, what changed, and why your silence suddenly feels heavier than any argument you could have had. You see, when a man becomes used to your attention, it becomes part of his rhythm. Even if he doesn't consciously value it, subconsciously it feeds him. It strokes his ego. It makes him feel wanted, admired, significant. But the moment you stop providing that emotional nourishment, his inner world starts to shift. He begins to sense that the power dynamic has changed. He no longer feels in control, and that loss of control unsettles him. He wonders why his presence no longer affects you, why your energy no longer revolves around him. This confusion isn't about love, it's about power. And when a man loses the power that came from your attention, he begins to see you differently. The woman who once seemed predictable now becomes mysterious. It's that mystery that draws his curiosity. He starts asking himself, did she stop caring? Did she find peace? Or did she finally realize she deserves more? That curiosity can be deeply uncomfortable for a man whose ego thrived on being needed. It's like looking into a mirror and seeing a reflection that's no longer flattering. The truth is, your silence doesn't just confuse him. It reveals him. It exposes how much of his confidence was built on your reactions, your approval, your emotional engagement. And now that you are no longer providing that, he must find it within himself. But few people are prepared for that kind of self-reflection, and so his confusion often turns into regret, into longing, into attempts to regain what he lost. But here is where your strength is tested. Because when he feels that confusion, he may try to re-establish control. He might reach out again, not out of love, but out of ego, to test if you're still available. You'll notice he doesn't come with changed behavior. He comes with curiosity. He wants to know if the door is still open, if your silence was temporary or permanent. This is where many women falter, because the temptation to respond, to explain, to comfort still lingers. But if you understand your worth, you will know that responding too quickly breaks the very silence that was teaching him your value. Detachment doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop feeding what drains you. When your energy retreats, something remarkable happens. His dominance begins to fade. The invisible control he once held over your emotions starts to dissolve. You're no longer emotionally reactive. You no longer respond to his inconsistency with desperation. Instead, you remain calm. That calmness is unsettling to him because it means he no longer has access to your emotional buttons. You're no longer predictable. You've stopped explaining yourself, stopped begging for effort, stopped trying to prove your worth. That shift terrifies the kind of man who relied on your emotional availability to validate his importance. The power dynamic that once existed between you begins to reverse, not because you took anything from him, but because you reclaimed what was always yours, and that is your attention. Your attention is your currency. When freely given, it enriches others. When withdrawn, it exposes their emptiness. A man who truly cares will not fear your silence. He will understand it. He will step forward to meet you in it. But a man who only cared for control will crumble under it. True power does not come from forcing others to see your worth. It comes from withdrawing gracefully when they don't. You are not meant to chase love. You are meant to embody it. The energy you used to spend on trying to be understood can now be used to understand yourself. That is how detachment transforms you. It redirects your energy inward. It reminds you that peace does not come from someone's response, but from your own alignment. There's a calm that comes when you stop explaining why you deserve better. You no longer need to debate it. You simply live it. And this living truth becomes evident to everyone around you, especially the one who took your energy for granted. Because the more grounded you become, the more his confusion grows. He senses something in you that he can't quite grasp. Your silence, your composure, your emotional stillness. It all communicates a message that words never could. I no longer need your validation. That realization shakes him. It disrupts the pattern he relied upon. He may try to provoke a reaction, to test if your silence means indifference or inner peace. But your task is not to react. Your task is to maintain your energy, because silence isn't about ignoring someone. It's about choosing peace over chaos. When you stay quiet from strength, you communicate maturity, self-respect, and emotional intelligence. And those are traits that even the most emotionally distant man cannot ignore. When a woman learns to withdraw with grace, her energy transforms. She becomes lighter, freer, more magnetic. This doesn't mean she's cold. It means she's clear. Her boundaries no longer come from fear of losing someone, but from love for herself. She knows that if someone truly values her, they will make an effort. And if they don't, her silence is answer enough. That is the essence of true detachment. It's not a wall, it's wisdom. You see, many people misunderstand silence as weakness, but it's the highest form of communication when used with awareness. When you stop chasing, you shift the vibration of the connection. You stop vibrating at the frequency of need and start resonating at the frequency of peace. That frequency attracts respect, and respect is the foundation of every meaningful relationship. When you respect yourself enough to stay silent rather than argue for your worth, you become unforgettable. And here's what often happens next. Once he realizes that you are no longer within his emotional control, something inside him awakens. It might be regret, it might be admiration, but it's always awareness. He begins to see that your absence isn't empty, it's full of meaning. Your detachment teaches him more about love than your presence ever could. Because your silence shows him what it feels like to lose the emotional safety you once provided. It's a quiet lesson, but a powerful one. In that silence, he begins to reflect. He remembers your consistency, your patience, your care, and he realizes how much he took it for granted. That's the paradox. What he once found ordinary now feels rare. What he once dismissed as emotional now feels irreplaceable. But the beauty of your detachment is that it's no longer about him. It's about you. You have grown beyond needing his recognition to validate your worth. You've discovered the peace that comes from no longer chasing closure from others. This is the transformation that silence brings. It changes you from reactive to reflective. It shifts your focus from them to yourself. You stop asking, "Why doesn't he see my worth?" and start asking, "Why did I keep giving it to someone who couldn't?" That single question awakens your self-awareness. It liberates you. You begin to see love not as something to be earned, but as something to be shared. You stop fighting for connection and start flowing with alignment. And the moment you do that, your entire energy changes. A calm woman is not weak, she's powerful. Because calmness cannot be manipulated. It cannot be provoked. It cannot be controlled. It's the highest expression of emotional maturity. It's what happens when a woman has faced her pain, processed it, and decided not to let it dictate her peace. That calm energy, that silent confidence, makes her magnetic, not just to others, but to life itself. And so, when you stop contacting a man who took your energy for granted, you're not trying to make him chase you. You're simply creating space for truth to emerge. You're letting the silence reveal who's meant to stay and who's meant to fade. You're allowing natural order to restore balance. If he truly values you, he will rise to meet your silence with effort. If he doesn't, your peace remains intact. Either way, you win. Your detachment becomes your strength. Your silence becomes your protection. Your energy becomes sacred again. And as you hold that stillness, life begins to move differently around you. People respect you more. Opportunities open. Your heart becomes lighter. Because you're no longer leaking your power into places that can't hold it. You've learned that walking away quietly is louder than any confrontation. You've learned that love doesn't mean endurance. It means alignment. In truth, silence is not an ending. It's a beginning. It's where transformation begins. It's where a woman learns to stand in her worth, not as a weapon, but as wisdom. It's where she realizes that real strength doesn't roar, it whispers. It says, "I no longer need to be understood to have peace." That is the moment when your energy becomes unshakable. That is when confusion turns to clarity, not just for him, but for you. Because silence, when rooted in self-worth, doesn't just change how others see you. It changes how you see yourself. A woman's silence carries a power that most people cannot comprehend. It's not just the absence of words. It's the presence of self-awareness. When a woman who once poured out her heart decides to grow quiet, that quietness becomes a mirror, one that reflects the truth with undeniable clarity. A man who was once accustomed to hearing her explain, plead, or express her love suddenly meets the weight of that silence. And in that silence, everything begins to echo. He starts to feel the space that her voice used to fill, the warmth that her presence used to bring, and the certainty that her consistency once offered. It's as if the world around him becomes still, not because she vanished, but because her energy no longer flows toward him. That withdrawal of energy creates a vacuum, and in that vacuum, he begins to hear something he never heard before, his own conscience. Silence doesn't just reflect what's gone wrong, it amplifies it. It magnifies the moments he dismissed her, the times he was distracted while she was trying to connect, the instances where he chose pride over vulnerability. Without her words to soften the truth, he starts to confront the impact of his own behavior. He replays old conversations in his mind, but this time he listens differently. Her silence changes the meaning of his memories. What once felt like casual moments now feel like lost opportunities. What once seemed unimportant suddenly holds weight. And this is what silence does. It transforms perception. It turns the background noise of routine into a haunting melody of realization. But what many fail to see is that her silence isn't meant to punish. It's meant to protect. Because every time a woman chooses silence over reaction, she's choosing peace over chaos. She's choosing dignity over drama. There comes a moment in every woman's life where she realizes that not every truth needs to be spoken aloud, that sometimes the most powerful statement is made by no longer explaining herself. She learns that when someone has already decided not to understand her, her words become meaningless. So, instead of trying to fix what cannot be fixed, she withdraws. She chooses stillness. And in that stillness, she begins to heal. He doesn't notice it right away, but that silence begins to pierce deeper than her words ever could. Because words can be debated, denied, dismissed, but silence cannot. Silence is unarguable. It doesn't demand attention, it commands it. It doesn't ask for understanding, it reveals who truly cares to understand. It exposes those who were listening only to respond. And it highlights those who never valued her presence until it disappeared. Silence becomes a teacher, a quiet but stern teacher that forces him to face the consequences of his emotional negligence. In the beginning, he might mistake her silence for distance. He might tell himself that she's just being cold, that she's trying to manipulate him. But as time passes, the reality begins to set in. He starts to realize that her silence doesn't come from anger. It comes from exhaustion. It comes from the moment she finally understood that no amount of effort could make someone see what they refuse to see. And that realization humbles him, because now he's left alone with the weight of what he took for granted. As he reflects, every memory begins to replay in sharper detail. The conversations, the small acts of care, the times she stayed patient when he was distant, all of it comes rushing back. He starts to understand the depth of her effort and the lightness of his. He remembers how her presence used to feel like safety, how her energy had a calming effect on him, and how her laughter made even the dullest moments feel alive. And now, in her absence, those moments no longer exist. The silence surrounding him is not empty. It's filled with the ghost of her presence. It's filled with everything he failed to cherish. Silence creates a kind of mirror that no one can escape. It shows him the imbalance in the relationship, the parts where she gave more, where he withdrew, where he failed to meet her halfway. And as he looks into that mirror, he begins to see not just what he lost, but who he became. Because a man is never fully aware of his emotional immaturity until he's faced with the emptiness left behind by a woman who stopped trying. Her silence reveals what his pride concealed. It exposes the truth that love cannot survive on one person's effort alone. Absence does something that presence never could. It forces awareness. When a woman steps back, It's as if she presses pause on the rhythm of connection. Everything that once flowed easily now becomes still. That stillness is uncomfortable at first, but it's also necessary. It creates space, and in that space, realization grows. Realization of what was taken for granted, what was ignored, and what was truly valuable. He begins to notice the little details he used to overlook. The sound of her laughter, the way she encouraged him, the way she believed in him even when he doubted himself. He remembers how effortlessly she gave what he rarely acknowledged. The human mind often recognizes value only through contrast, and silence is the greatest contrast of all. Her absence doesn't just remove her presence, it removes the emotional rhythm he had grown dependent on. He no longer receives her check in messages, her concern, her understanding tone. And without them, he's left to face his own thoughts. The mind begins to crave what once soothed it. But when he reaches for it, and it's no longer there, that craving turns into reflection. That reflection becomes uncomfortable, and discomfort becomes his greatest teacher. In that emptiness, both begin to heal differently. She heals by reconnecting with herself, and he begins to awaken to the truth of his actions. Her silence becomes the medicine for her peace and the mirror for his growth. That's why silence is so powerful. It doesn't just protect the one who withdraws, it transforms the one left behind. It's in that quiet space that both begin to see reality without distortion. You see, absence is not always about losing something. Sometimes it's about rediscovering yourself in the space where you stopped losing energy. It's about remembering that your value was never dependent on how someone treated you. It's about realizing that your love was pure, your intention was real, and your effort was honest. The moment you stop trying to prove your worth, you start to feel it. And that feeling creates a peace that words can't describe. A woman's silence can turn into a sanctuary. It becomes a space where she learns to listen to her own heart again. She begins to see how much she gave and how little she received. She begins to understand that love without reciprocity is self-betrayal. And when that understanding settles in, she no longer carries resentment. Instead, she carries wisdom. The silence that once felt heavy becomes peaceful. The distance that once hurt becomes healing. She no longer waits for him to come back because she realizes that she never truly left herself. She just forgot how powerful her energy was when directed inward. And as she grows in that silence, something else happens. The more she heals, the more her energy changes. Her presence becomes magnetic in a new way. She no longer radiates need or longing. She radiates self-contentment. That shift is deeply felt by the man who once took her for granted. He may not understand it fully, but he senses it. Her silence has transformed her energy from chasing to attracting, from reacting to reflecting. It's no longer him she's orbiting around. It's herself. And that self-centeredness, in the most spiritual sense, becomes her new source of power. He feels it. The same woman who once reached out first, who once tried to mend everything, now carries a calm that unsettles him. She's no longer reachable in the way she once was. He can message her, but her responses are shorter, colder, clearer. Not out of bitterness, but out of balance. She no longer invests where there is no return. He can feel that. He can sense that her energy no longer flows toward him. And that realization makes him reflect on why. That's when his awareness begins to deepen. He starts to see that her silence was never about punishment. It was about peace. He remembers the times she tried to communicate and he didn't listen. The times she was patient and he ignored it. The times she needed presence and he gave excuses. And now, in her absence, he sees it all clearly. Because silence removes the noise of distraction and leaves only the essence of truth. Absence teaches him that love isn't about constant communication. It's about connection. And connection dies the moment one person stops showing up emotionally. Her silence becomes the sound of boundaries. It tells him, without words, I've reached my limit. And for a man who truly has feelings, that realization can be awakening. It can inspire change, not through guilt, but through awareness. But for the one who never truly cared, her silence becomes the closure she never needed to ask for. For her, silence becomes a sacred space, a rebirth. It's where she reclaims the parts of herself she gave away. It's where she learns to sit with her emotions without running back to the source of her pain. It's where she learns that love doesn't demand suffering. And in that realization, she rises. Her silence becomes strength. Her calm becomes confidence. Her boundaries become beauty. She no longer explains why she walked away. Her energy explains it for her. In time, he begins to understand that her silence was not emptiness. It was full of the lessons he refused to learn when she was still speaking. He realizes that every time she went quiet during an argument, it wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. Every time she chose not to respond, it wasn't indifference, it was self-control. Every time she chose distance, it wasn't because she stopped caring, it was because she started caring for herself. That's what silence does. It transforms chaos into clarity, confusion into understanding, and endings into evolution. It's not a weapon, it's an awakening. And those who learn to sit in it, who learn to honor it, find peace that no apology can give, because silence, when used with awareness, becomes the language of self-worth. It communicates everything words cannot. It says, I see what you've done, I understand it, and I choose not to respond from pain. It's the highest form of maturity and the truest expression of strength. And so, a woman's silence will always speak volumes. It will echo through his mind, not because she wanted to hurt him, but because she finally stopped hurting herself. It will remind him of the peace she brought, the love she gave, and the light she carried. And though he may not realize it in time, that silence will become the lesson that transforms him, or the regret that stays with him. Because once a woman learns the power of silence, she never returns to the noise again. When you stop reaching out, you give him something he never expected: silence. And this silence carries more weight than every word you've ever spoken. Because when a woman who once gave her heart, her presence, her care, suddenly stops, the energy shifts completely. He begins to feel the emptiness of the space where your voice used to live. He realizes that attention is not eternal and affection is not owed. This is the awakening moment for both, the man and the woman. The man begins to notice how much of his validation depended on your presence, and you begin to notice how much of your peace depended on your distance. When you stop reaching out, it's not about anger or punishment. It's about clarity. You begin to see who makes an effort when you no longer do. You start to understand that relationships are not sustained by words, but by reciprocity. A connection cannot survive if one heart gives endlessly while the other takes endlessly. It needs balance. It needs both to water the bond with care, not just one. The moment you stop initiating, you are no longer filling the void for both. You are letting the truth emerge naturally. If he values you, he will notice the silence and step forward. If he doesn't, he will drift further into it. Either way, you are no longer trapped in illusion. In this quiet withdrawal, you also learn that love cannot be measured by how much you try to keep someone interested. Love that requires constant reminders to stay alive is not love, it is dependency. You were never meant to be the only one holding the thread together. When a man truly cares, he doesn't wait for your message to remember your worth. He reaches out because he wants to. not because you remind him. He shows up not because of pressure, but because of value. So when you stop reaching out, what you are really doing is allowing the natural law of effort to reveal itself. You are stepping back and watching who meets you halfway when you no longer run toward them. Sometimes it hurts at first. The silence feels like rejection. You wonder if you are being too cold, too distant, too detached. But in truth, this is not coldness, this is wisdom. It is awareness that the heart cannot thrive where it is not watered. The woman who understands this does not chase because she knows that the right connection never needs to be forced. You stop texting, stop checking, stop waiting for replies. You give life back to your own energy. You fill your time with things that feed your spirit, not with thoughts that drain it. And slowly, something beautiful happens. You stop noticing his absence and start noticing your own presence. You realize how peaceful it is when your mind is not begging for attention. A man feels this shift deeply, even if he never admits it. When you used to reach out, he knew you were always there, that no matter what he did, you would return. It gave him comfort, even arrogance. But now, there is silence. And in that silence, he begins to hear something he hasn't heard before, his own conscience. He starts to question his behavior. Did I take her for granted? Was she always the one holding this together? The absence becomes the teacher. The woman's silence becomes the lesson. He begins to notice how empty his day feels without your voice checking in. He realizes how much of his peace used to depend on your attention. This is the unseen power of emotional withdrawal. It forces reflection. When you stop trying to sustain a one-sided bond, you don't lose connection, you gain truth. Because any man who was genuinely connected to you, you will feel your energy even from a distance. He will reach back with effort, not excuses. But the one who doesn't, he was never truly with you. He was only attached to the comfort of being wanted. And so, your silence becomes a filter. It separates what was real from what was convenient. You are no longer asking, does he love me? You are observing, what does his behavior reveal when I stop giving? This is a sacred kind of discipline, a spiritual test of alignment. There is something deeply magnetic about a woman who knows when to stop trying. Her energy shifts from chasing to attracting. Her silence is not passive, it's powerful. She no longer seeks validation because she understands her worth is not negotiable. And that changes everything. A man may not notice the noise of your words, but he always notices the echo of your absence. He may not react immediately, but eventually he feels the imbalance. The same silence that once made you feel forgotten becomes the silence that makes him remember. Every woman must understand this. Withdrawal is not weakness. It is strength wrapped in stillness. It says, I am no longer willing to carry what you refuse to hold. You are not closing your heart, you are reclaiming your peace. You are teaching through energy, not argument. And this teaching is the most effective one, because while words can be ignored, energy cannot. When a man feels your absence, he feels the loss of your care, your softness, your emotional presence, and he realizes that those were not small things. They were everything. The woman who learns to walk away in peace leaves an impression that no anger could ever create. She doesn't slam doors. She simply stops standing in them. She doesn't beg for closure. She becomes it. Her silence becomes the mirror that reflects his choices back to him. And while he may take time to understand it, the realization always comes. He sees that your love was a privilege, not a guarantee. He begins to remember the effort you gave, the patience you showed, the energy you offered freely. And he understands that no one stays where they are constantly unappreciated. This kind of woman becomes unforgettable, not because she played games, but because she mastered balance. She loved deeply, but she also knew when to let go gracefully. Her detachment was not cruelty, it was consciousness. And when a man realizes he has lost such a woman, regret follows naturally. Not the kind of regret that demands forgiveness, but the quiet kind that whispers, "I should have done better." This is the moment he understands that consistency is more powerful than charm, and respect is more attractive than desire. A woman's silence teaches a man more than her words ever could. It teaches him the language of value. It shows him that love cannot thrive in imbalance. When she no longer reaches out, he begins to reach inward, searching for what he lost and why. And in that search, he either grows or fades. That's the power of emotional withdrawal. It's not an act of revenge, but an act of evolution. Both evolve through it. The man through realization, the woman through liberation. The woman who no longer chases has discovered something essential. Peace is more precious than presence. She doesn't fear losing anyone anymore because she knows that what is truly hers cannot be taken away by distance, and what is not meant for her will never stay, no matter how much she tries. This realization becomes her anchor. She becomes centered, calm, unbothered by outcomes. The storm that once lived inside her, the one caused by anxiety, uncertainty, overthinking, fades away. What remains is stillness. Her stillness is magnetic. It draws in everything that resonates with her energy and repels what doesn't. A man feels this on a spiritual level. He can sense when a woman's energy no longer depends on him. That's when attraction shifts. She becomes mysterious again. Not because she hides, but because she is no longer seeking. He begins to wonder what she's thinking, who she's becoming, what she's doing without him. The attention he once took for granted now becomes the attention he desires again. In the end, the one who learns this balance becomes the one who holds the real power, not over him, but over herself. Because the true essence of power is emotional discipline. It's the ability to feel deeply but act wisely. It's knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, when to give and when to retreat. This is the art of balanced femininity, the calm strength that does not need to prove its value, yet its presence commands respect. And so, when you stop reaching out, you are not ending a connection. You are purifying it. You are removing everything that was built on dependency, ego, or habit. What remains is truth. Some men will vanish in that truth, unable to meet your energy. Others will rise to it, realizing what they lost and trying to meet you where you now stand, in peace, not in need. But either way, you have reclaimed the most important connection of all, the one with yourself. The journey of a woman's heart is not about how much she gives to others, but how deeply she learns to give to herself without guilt. It is about knowing that love should not cost your dignity, your self-respect, or your emotional freedom. And when you finally understand this, silence becomes your ally, not your fear. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop making it easy for them to forget your worth. Your silence doesn't end the story. It transforms it. It teaches that peace is not found in how others respond to you, but in how you respond to yourself. And that lesson, once learned, changes everything about how you love, how you live, and how you walk away. If his feelings were genuine, he will feel your silence like a storm. If they were shallow, he will disappear into it. That is the nature of emotional truth. Silence is not neutral. It is a mirror that reveals the depth of connection. When a woman who once poured love, care, and attention suddenly withdraws, something profound happens in the energetic field between two souls. The man begins to notice not only her absence, but also the void within himself that her energy used to fill. A genuine heart will feel that absence as loss, as a lesson, as a calling to reflect. But the man whose feelings were built on ego or convenience will vanish not because he is strong, but because the silence exposed what was never truly there. The beauty of this silence lies in its ability to separate illusion from reality. Many people claim love, but few demonstrate it when no one is watching, when attention fades, when communication ends. Real love remains connected even in stillness. A man who truly loved your presence does not forget you when the conversation stops. He feels you in the quiet moments of his day. He thinks about what you used to bring into his life, not because of dependency, but because your energy carried meaning. The one who loved you genuinely feels your silence as a signal to realign, to ask himself, what have I done? What have I ignored? He doesn't disappear because he values the bond beyond convenience. But the one who fades quickly was never with you. He was only with the feeling of being admired. He was attached to being desired, not to desiring deeply. Silence exposes this difference. When you stop contacting him, you are not creating distance. You are revealing truth. Those who stay connected energetically despite the silence have roots. Those who fade away had only surface ties. And this realization is freeing, because the silence is not punishment, it's purification. It removes those who were only standing close to you out of habit, and it brings clarity about who is capable of walking with you at your depth. You see, a man who genuinely loves does not feel your silence as an attack. He feels it as a wake-up call. He begins to recognize that attention is not infinite. He realizes that the woman who once showed care, patience, and warmth has now withdrawn because something in her spirit is tired. That understanding forces him to look within. It makes him confront his own behavior, his choices, and his lack of reciprocity. He feels your absence not as manipulation, but as consequence. And that is where true growth begins, when the silence becomes his mirror, not his enemy. The shallow one, however, disappears because silence starves his ego. He cannot feed off validation anymore. He starts to look elsewhere for another source of admiration, another person to make him feel important. And though this may sting to watch from afar, it is actually a gift. Because now you can see who was genuinely connected and who was only entertained. The silence reveals what time would have hidden much longer. It saves you from continuing to pour your soul into an empty cup. When you learn to trust silence as truth, you stop fearing it. You stop seeing it as rejection and start seeing it as revelation. You begin to understand that silence is a divine tool. It shows you who can sit with your absence and who collapses without your attention. The ones who vanish do not deserve resentment. They deserve release. Because love that cannot survive a pause was never built for the long journey. Love that fades in silence was never rooted in understanding. And so, you begin to walk differently. You no longer cling to what needs noise to exist. You learn to value stillness because it brings you closer to your own strength. You learn that the woman who can sit in silence without fear has already mastered a powerful art. The art of detachment without bitterness. She does not hate those who fade. She simply blesses their exit. She does not chase those who retreat. She respects their choice. Her silence becomes her boundary, and her peace becomes her teacher. Stopping contact is not punishment. It is preservation. There is a vast difference between revenge and self-protection. Revenge seeks to hurt another. Preservation seeks to heal yourself. When you withdraw communication, you are choosing to protect your emotional field from energy that no longer reciprocates. It is not about coldness. It is about awareness. You begin to realize that your energy is sacred, that not everyone deserves unlimited access to your emotions. You cannot keep offering warmth to those who stand in the cold by choice. When you step back, it is not because you stopped caring. It is because you started caring about yourself more deeply. You no longer chase closure from people who gave you confusion. You no longer beg for reassurance from people who thrive on keeping you uncertain. You realize that sometimes silence says, "I see what you are doing, and I am choosing not to participate." It is the language of emotional maturity. You are not reacting, you are responding to reality, and that response is calm, clear, powerful. Preservation means recognizing that your peace has value. It means understanding that not everyone is meant to walk beside you forever. Some are lessons, not lifetimes. When you stop contacting him, you are not ending your story. You are ending a pattern. The pattern of overextending, of over-explaining, of over-loving. You are choosing to create space between your heart and what drains it. That space is not empty. It is healing. It gives you room to breathe, to recalibrate, to see things as they are, not as you wish them to be. In that space, you rediscover yourself. You remember what your laughter sounds like when it is not tied to someone else's attention. You remember what your mind feels like when it is not waiting for a reply. You remember what your soul feels like when it is free. That is preservation. It is choosing yourself not out of pride, but out of necessity, because you cannot keep watering gardens that refuse to grow. You cannot heal where you are continually hurt. Preservation is wisdom in motion. It is the act of walking away before your light dims. The world often misunderstands this kind of silence. They see it as rejection, as distance, as arrogance. But it is none of those. It is a declaration. I am not abandoning anyone. I am returning to myself. That is self, love in its most authentic form. It is not loud or dramatic. It is quiet, steady, peaceful. It comes from the knowing that love should never feel like begging, and peace should not require permission. When you reach this understanding, you begin to see how the universe works in harmony with your silence. The moment you preserve your energy, the universe begins to rearrange the people and situations around you. It removes those who are not aligned with your vibration. It introduces calm where chaos once lived. You start noticing blessings in your solitude. Opportunities appear, clarity deepens, and your inner voice grows louder. This is what happens when you honor your own silence. It becomes the bridge between who you were and who you are becoming. The universe often tests you by removing what distracts you so it can return what aligns with your peace. Many times, what you call loss is actually protection. The person you wanted so badly may have been the one holding back your growth. The silence that feels painful at first often turns into the very silence that brings you closer to your destiny. You start to see that nothing that truly belongs to you will ever leave you confused. What is meant for you will not need to be chased. It will meet you in alignment. When the universe removes someone, it does not do it to punish you. It does it to redirect you. Sometimes you must be pulled away from what you think you want so you can discover what you truly need. Silence becomes the divine pause that allows that redirection to happen. You may not see it immediately, but over time you realize that what left was replaced by something far greater. Your peace, your focus, your strength. This process teaches you to surrender. You stop fighting the natural flow of life. You stop holding on to people who have already let go of you in spirit. You understand that what is leaving is making space for what is meant to enter. You begin to trust timing instead of trying to control it. You begin to see that peace is not found in keeping people close, but in keeping yourself centered. In that realization, silence becomes sacred. It's no longer about who notices it, but about how much clarity it brings you. The moment you stop contacting him, the universe starts speaking to you. Instead, you hear it in your intuition, in the calm that follows the storm, in the subtle signs that life sends to reassure you that you did the right thing. This is divine order working quietly behind your pain. Every ending is an opening in disguise. Every silence is preparation for sound. The woman who learns to see this becomes unshakable. She no longer chases closure because she understands that silence is closure. She no longer seeks revenge because she understands that peace is the highest response. She no longer fears being alone because she realizes she was never truly alone. The universe was always with her, guiding her, protecting her, waiting for her to reclaim her power. So when you stop contacting a man, understand this truth: your silence is not empty. It is full of energy, full of transformation, full of lessons. It is a sacred recalibration between you and the universe. You are not losing control, you are gaining alignment. And that alignment will always lead you where you are meant to be. Because what is truly for you will feel peaceful, not painful. It will move toward you naturally, not because you chased it, but because you matched its frequency through your stillness. Silence, therefore, is not the end of communication. It is the beginning of connection with yourself. And from that connection, everything else that is meant to find you will. A woman's withdrawal is not a performance. It is not a tactic to provoke guilt or regret. It is an awakening of self-worth. There comes a moment when she realizes that chasing love makes her lose her center, that begging for effort diminishes her energy, and that trying to be understood by someone who refuses to listen is the slowest form of self-abandonment. So she begins to step back, not because she stopped caring, but because she finally understands that her peace is her greatest act of self-respect. This is the point where her energy shifts. She is no longer trying to convince someone of her value. She embodies it, and that silent embodiment becomes louder than any word she could ever speak. When a woman withdraws, the world around her feels it. The man who once took her presence for granted feels the stillness where her warmth used to be. He begins to notice how much her energy anchored his days, how her voice brought softness to his chaos. Suddenly, the absence of her messages, her laughter, her calm steadiness becomes a void he cannot fill. At first, he may brush it off, telling himself she is just being distant or emotional. But as the silence stretches, he feels something heavier, a mirror being placed before him. That mirror shows him what he contributed or what he failed to. It forces him to face his reflection without the cushion of her forgiveness. A woman's withdrawal is her spiritual evolution in motion. She stops seeking external validation because she finally understands that her worth is not up for negotiation. The same energy she once used to explain, to justify, to try harder, now returns inward. It becomes fuel for her growth, nourishment for her soul. She begins to pour that love into her own life instead of into a void that never reflected it back. And this shift, this return to self, is what makes her energy magnetic. She no longer demands attention. She commands it without words. When he sees her thriving in silence, confusion sets in. He cannot understand how she moved from dependence to peace so effortlessly. He remembers the woman who used to reply instantly, who worried when he went quiet, who showed up even when tired. Now, that woman no longer waits. She no longer explains. Her world no longer revolves around his moods. And this change shakes something deep inside him, not his heart at first, but his ego. Because he was used to being her priority, and now he isn't even her afterthought. That's when his curiosity awakens. He begins to check, to wonder, to look from afar. He scrolls through her photos, replays her laughter in his mind, recalls the comfort of her presence. But he is no longer part of her peace. This is the paradox of emotional detachment. It often brings back what you once chased. Because people are not truly drawn to what needs them. They are drawn to what is whole without them. The woman who finds contentment in her own company becomes radiant. She becomes a mystery again, not because she hides, but because she no longer seeks. He looks at her and senses something he cannot explain: freedom. And that freedom both attracts and intimidates him. It is the reflection of everything he lost when he mistook her love for permanence. You see, silence has a way of revealing who you are to yourself. The man who depended on your attention to feel significant now faces the emptiness he tried to avoid. He begins to realize that the warmth he dismissed was his emotional anchor. The peace he ignored was his only balance. Your absence becomes a mirror reflecting his choices. But for you, the silence becomes healing. You start to rediscover your rhythm, your interests, your inner voice. The same energy you used to spend waiting for messages now becomes the energy you use to build your purpose. You start to glow differently, not because someone loves you, but because you love yourself correctly, and that glow cannot be ignored. When he sees you at peace, his mind enters conflict. Pride tells him to stay distant, but regret whispers louder each day. Pride says, "She'll come back like before." But the silence keeps proving otherwise. Days turn into weeks, and still no message from you. Slowly, the illusion breaks. He realizes that the control he thought he had was an illusion powered by your effort. Without your effort, there is no connection. Without your communication, there is no bridge. The silence shows him that you were not the needy one. You were the one holding everything together. But this realization often comes too late, because when a woman reclaims her power, she rarely returns to the place she lost it. She learns that peace is more addictive than attention. She learns that being alone feels lighter than being half loved. She learns that self-worth does not scream. It whispers softly through every boundary she now protects. She walks with grace, not resentment. She doesn't announce her healing, she becomes it. And that transformation makes her unrecognizable to those who once drained her. Many will call her cold or detached, but they are only describing their inability to manipulate her anymore. Her peace disturbs those who thrived on her chaos. Her silence unsettles those who relied on her emotional generosity. But this is the beauty of spiritual evolution. It separates you from anything that cannot match your frequency. Her withdrawal is not about anger, it's about alignment. She no longer tries to fit where she no longer belongs. When a woman reaches this point, she stops explaining her absence. She doesn't defend her silence. She simply lives. She focuses on her energy, her goals, her inner peace. Her mind is not occupied with, "Does he miss me?" It is focused on, "Am I living in harmony with myself?" This subtle shift changes everything about her vibration. She starts attracting people who respect her boundaries instead of testing them. She begins drawing opportunities that reflect her growth. The world outside adjusts to match the world within her. The man, on the other hand, begins to feel time differently. What once felt certain now feels uncertain. He starts to see you in the quiet moments. When he sits alone, when something reminds him of you. He feels a tug in his heart, not because you said anything, but because you stopped saying everything. That silence carries energy. It speaks of maturity, of strength, of a love that no longer pleads to be seen. And that energy lingers. It becomes the echo he cannot escape. He remembers your patience, your softness, your forgiveness. But now he also remembers the weight of his indifference. He begins to wonder if another will make him feel as seen as you once did. And deep down, he knows the answer. Because the kind of love that flows from a conscious woman is rare. It is not found in abundance. It is cultivated through emotional depth and spiritual clarity. When she walks away, she doesn't take your peace out of revenge. She takes it because her energy was the source of it. You only notice its power when it's gone. Every man who loses such a woman learns a silent lesson. You cannot keep what you do not appreciate. You cannot take endlessly from someone who was willing to give everything. A time always comes when the giver realizes that her energy is divine and divinity cannot be drained. So she steps back. And the moment she does, the entire balance of the connection changes. The one who was chasing becomes calm, and the one who was careless begins to chase. This is not manipulation. This is natural law. Energy always flows where it is respected. The silence of a woman is not an ending. It is a revelation. It reveals to the man whether his affection was genuine or conditional. It reveals to her whether her love was empowering or exhausting. And once this clarity appears, there is no going back. She no longer seeks validation from temporary hearts. She no longer builds her joy around external attention. Her silence is now her sanctuary. It protects her from what used to drain her. It becomes the space where she remembers her strength. Every woman who reaches this point becomes magnetic to life itself. She draws abundance, peace, and joy because she no longer resists the natural flow of energy. She understands that everything meant for her moves toward her effortlessly, while everything unaligned drifts away naturally. There is no struggle in her presence anymore. There is ease. That ease is her new beauty. That calm is her new power. That silence is her new voice. The man who once felt superior now feels humbled. Not because she punished him, but because life has shown him what self-worth looks like in action. He may return with words, but she now listens with awareness, not with hope. She no longer confuses apologies with change. Her peace has taught her discernment, and that discernment keeps her steady. She no longer responds to energy that only stirs her anxiety. She responds only to energy that brings her peace. And if he does return, he will find a different version of her. The one who no longer reacts, no longer waits, no longer gives endlessly. The one who listens deeply but trusts actions more than promises. The one who sees through charm and looks for consistency. The one who smiles kindly but knows when to walk away. Her heart is open, but her boundaries are firm. Her love is pure, but it is no longer naive. She has learned that her worth does not decrease because someone failed to see it. When you stop contacting a man, you give both of you the gift of truth. You give him space to reflect, and you give yourself space to heal. You allow the universe to show you whether the connection was meant to evolve or end. You release control and invite divine timing, and in doing so, you step into the most powerful place a woman can stand, in peace with herself. The truth is, you were never meant to chase love. You were meant to embody it. You were never meant to beg for effort. You were meant to inspire it. And you were never meant to lose yourself trying to be understood. You were meant to understand yourself so deeply that misunderstanding no longer shakes you. That is the essence of true power. Not control, but calmness. Not silence born of fear, but silence born of wisdom. When a woman reaches this level of self-awareness, she no longer needs to prove her value. She becomes the proof. Her energy speaks before she does. Her boundaries set the tone of her relationships. Her peace becomes her new standard. And in this state, the world responds differently. People treat her with respect, opportunities align effortlessly, and love flows from authenticity rather than need. That is the quiet transformation that begins the moment she stops contacting him. Not an ending, but a beginning. A beginning of her freedom, her clarity, and her divine strength. She no longer asks, will he come back? She asks, do I even want him to? Because now she understands something eternal. The love that truly belongs to you will never require you to abandon yourself to keep it. When you finally stop reaching out, when your silence replaces all the words you once gave freely, something sacred begins to take shape within you. You realize that love was never meant to be a battlefield of proving, explaining, or convincing. Love is presence, not pursuit. It thrives when two souls meet halfway, not when one runs endlessly toward a door that refuses to open. Silence becomes your teacher. It teaches you how to sit with your own energy, how to hear your own thoughts, and how to recognize the deep peace that comes from choosing yourself. There is a quiet power in no longer reacting, because when you stop reacting, you stop giving others the ability to shape your emotional weather. You no longer wake up wondering how he feels or what he's thinking. You wake up wondering how you feel and what you are creating in your own life. That shift in focus is liberation. It is the turning point between losing yourself for love and finding yourself through love's lessons. Many believe that silence is weakness, that it means you have no words left or no strength to fight. But silence is the most disciplined form of response. It says, I've seen enough. I've given enough. Now I choose peace. The one who misused your kindness will one day remember that quiet withdrawal more than any argument or outburst, because silence stays. It echoes in the mind of those who once believed you would never leave. When you stop contacting a man, you aren't trying to punish him. You are reclaiming balance. You are saying, I respect myself enough not to beg for what should flow naturally. That is not pride, that is self-awareness. That is maturity. You understand that love must be reciprocal, or it becomes self-sacrifice disguised as devotion. You begin to see that chasing someone who is emotionally unavailable doesn't lead to connection. It leads to exhaustion. Your absence will not go unnoticed. It may confuse him, challenge him, even humble him. Some will try to come back, not because they love you deeply, but because they miss the comfort of your attention. Others will vanish entirely, revealing their true intentions. And that, too, is a gift. The silence becomes a filter. It shows you who can stand in the stillness with you and who needs noise to survive. You no longer need to explain your worth to anyone. You simply embody it. The energy you once poured into maintaining connections now returns to nurturing your dreams, your growth, your spiritual clarity. You learn to move with grace through uncertainty, understanding that if something is meant for you, it will never require you to shrink yourself to keep it. There is immense peace in realizing that closure doesn't always come from words. It often comes from acceptance. You stop searching for apologies, explanations, or reasons. You simply understand that not every soul that enters your life is meant to stay. Some come to awaken parts of you that were sleeping. Some come to teach, some to mirror, some to test, and some to transform you completely. You learn that letting go isn't about giving up. It's about giving space. Space for clarity. Space for alignment. Space for life to show you what is truly meant to be yours. And once you embrace that, you move differently. You no longer chase connection. You attract it. You no longer fear loss. You understand that what is lost was never truly yours. The silence you create is not empty. It is full of wisdom. It carries the strength of all the times you chose understanding over reaction, peace over pride, and self-respect over validation. It carries the power of your transformation, the shift from needing love to embodying it. And as life moves forward, you begin to realize that what you once thought was rejection was actually redirection. What felt like the end was, in truth, the beginning of your alignment. You no longer look back with resentment, but with gratitude. For without that silence, you would never have discovered your own voice. You stop measuring love by how much attention someone gives you and start recognizing it by how safe you feel in their presence. You no longer confuse comfort with connection or attachment with affection. You have learned the art of balance, of giving without losing, of loving without begging, and of walking away without hate. And somewhere in that silence, you finally meet yourself. The version of you that is whole, grounded, and at peace. You realize that your energy is sacred, your time is precious, and your love is powerful. You no longer need to prove that to anyone. You simply live in that truth quietly, confidently, and unapologetically. Because when you stop contacting someone who no longer values your presence, you don't lose anything. You gain everything. You gain yourself. You gain clarity. You gain freedom. And that is the kind of love that no silence can ever take away.